Good afternoon, everybody. This is Will Friedman, the President of Public Agenda. Thank you for joining us for this webinar that we're conducting with Success for All. The name of the webinar is Success Strategies for High Poverty, High Achieving Schools. You'll be hearing from a number of presenters. As I said, I'm with Public Agenda. We're a nonpartisan, nonprofit organization that helps diverse citizens and leaders navigate complex and divisive issues and work towards sustainable solutions. We do a combination of public opinion research and public and stakeholder engagement. And we conducted the research that resulted in the report, Failure is Not an Option, that you'll be hearing about in the first half of this webinar. Following that, you'll be hearing from Success for All and the other presenters. I'll introduce who the presenters are now. We'll begin with my colleague, Carolin Hagelskamp, who is the Director of Research at Public Agenda. And then we'll be hearing from Bob Slavin and Nancy Madden of Success for All, from the Success for All Foundation. And then Marjorie Radakovich, who's the principal of East Garfield Elementary School in Steubenville, Ohio. That's one of the schools that was part of the research that you'll be hearing about, and that employs the Success for All program. Before we begin, let me just situate you a little bit in terms of the webinar system. If you've connected to the audio for this over your computer, and if you're having any difficulty with sound, you can also try connecting via the telephone. There are instructions on the slide in front of you about how to do that, and that might work better for you. It often does. Also, to the right of your screen, you'll see a control panel that you can either hide or display by clicking on the arrow. Everybody is muted for the webinar today, so we can't hear you at this point. But towards the end, in the last 15 minutes, we are going to open it up for Q&A, and the way we want to handle that, because we have actually quite a large crowd, well over 100 people, we think the sort of simplest way to handle that is by asking you to type in any questions you have in the chat box to the right of your screen. Those questions will only be seen by the presenters and not by the broader audience. So those questions, just type them in any time during the presentation or at the end, and we'll respond to them in the Q&A session. And if we don't have time to respond to them, we can follow up with emails because we'll have captured them via the chat box. So that's the system we're going to use. As I said, we're going to begin with our research report, Failure is Not an Option, and share those, some of the key findings from that. And you can also access the full report at our website, and you'll see the link to that on your screen later on. And then we're going to shift over to Nancy and Bob to talk about the Success for All program and how that can help schools become the kinds of schools that you'll be hearing about in the research. And then finally, we'll go to Margie about her experience as a leader in one such school. So I'm going to hand the phone over to Carolin now, and she'll talk to you about the research findings. Thank you.
Failure is Not an Option is a research project that Public Agenda conducted in 2012 in Ohio. This project was sponsored by the Ohio Business Roundtable and the Ohio Department of Education, and we also worked in partnership with Professor Herb Asher at the Ohio State University. The goal of this study was to investigate stories of success among Ohio's high-poverty schools. So we visited 9 schools across Ohio who in recent years had shown remarkable academic success. 6 of those schools were chosen because they had received the Ohio Department of Education Schools of Promise Award in 2010 and 11, and at least 1 year prior to that. This award is largely based on students' achievements on state standardized tests. In addition, we selected 3 schools that had made remarkable progress towards getting the Schools of Promise Award. And then here you see a map that shows where the final 8 schools of the sample were located. We were careful to bring together a sample that included elementary schools, middle schools, and high schools, and it was also fairly representative of Ohio's geographic diversity, including schools in very rural areas as well as in each of the 3 largest cities. We spent 2 to 3 days in each school and conducted nearly 50 interviews and about 40 focus groups with teachers, administrators, parents, students, and a range of community partners. The methodology was such that we sought to capture their perspectives on what made their school successful despite the economic challenges they face. These schools were extremely pleased to have the chance to tell us their story of success, and because all of these schools, or nearly all of these schools, had been labeled in an academic emergency or in continuous improvement at some point, and then became schools of promise. Excuse me. Before I get to the findings, it's important to understand that by focusing on the school as the level of analysis, the study is not suggesting that the larger socioeconomic context does not matter. These schools are situated in economically disadvantaged communities, and many of the challenges that they face are due to factors beyond the walls of their buildings and that require serious attention. Yet, we also believe that it's important to highlight positive examples of where and how success is possible, and have serious conversations of what we can learn from these schools. So with that said, I want to move into telling you a little bit about some of the main key attributes of these schools that we visited. So in all these schools, teachers, parents, students, and community partners describe their school as a big family, and they literally use the word family in every single school we went to. They talked very much about how each adult cares about each student's well-being and how many extra hours and extra energy teachers and principals spend making sure that their students get the attention, the nutrition, the love, and the support they need to learn and to succeed. Especially in the rural areas, many of the teachers had grown up in the communities, and they spoke about their jobs as a way to give back and improve their communities. You'll see throughout the presentation, you will see quotes of what we heard in these schools. Moreover, the study very much highlights the role principals play in building and maintaining a culture of success in schools and in cultivating immense personal commitment and responsibilities on the side of teachers. The key here really is that we saw leaders who treat teachers as professionals. They grant them autonomy in implementing a vision and in being in charge of their curricula, but also supporting teachers in their roles and not being, and at the same time these principals were not afraid of holding their staff accountable. In some way, the tough love approach that teachers took with their students, principals seem to be using with their teachers. Next, you often hear about the importance of cultivating high expectations for all students, both in terms of their academic performance as well as with regards to behavior and discipline. In these 9 schools, high expectations wasn't just a buzzword. Teachers and administrators had purposefully developed a common language around these expectations, and they expressed them often indirectly to students. These expectations were made explicit through signs on the walls, mission statements, in frequent conversations with students, and in the way adults talked to each other and behaved vis-a-vis each other. Adults in these schools were all on the same page in terms of how to respond to students' misbehavior, what to do when students needed extra help, and how to reward good performance. And at the same time, the students that we spoke to seemed to have internalized and very much understood this culture of expectations, or these high expectations. They told us they felt safe, they felt valued in their schools, and they seemed to know what was expected of them. And they also said that they trusted their teachers, both with academic issues as well as social issues. Most concretely, all these schools were very data-focused. They don't only utilize the annual state tests very well, but they also all experiment with their own data collection systems. Those schools focus on monitoring individual student success minutely, and so that no student can fall behind unnoticed and instead receive interventions immediately. And literally, that often meant some kind of intervention in the same week that their grade dropped. Moreover, teachers work very closely in teams, developing curriculum, interventions, and around data use. These teams exist within and across grade levels and within subjects and across subjects as teachers feel they need. We heard that collaborations and data use really go hand in hand. So you have effective data use that depends on genuine collaborations, and then collaborations are enhanced through the need to utilize data and act on it. And very importantly, we heard that administrators incentivize and support teamwork and data use. Extra time is set aside in these schools. Teachers go on team building trips, and in some schools there were monetary incentives for teachers to collaborate to ensure success collectively. And moreover, new job applicants, we learned, are carefully evaluated on their potential to be very good team players. And it's common in these schools that teachers are consulted and weigh in when new hires are made. And finally, these 9 schools, each in its own way, are very good at leveraging community partnerships. Depending on their location, these schools had, of course, very different types of community resources available, but each school's administration focused on garnering as much support as they could. So in some places that meant really leveraging personal relationships and bringing individual community members to volunteer and help out in the school. And other schools relied on significant support from corporate sponsors such as GE or Cincinnati Bell, whose workers participate in mentorship programs. In all cases, the focus was on building sustained relationships between students and mentors and ensuring that volunteer activities weren't just a one-off event. And here are just a few more characteristics of what we and descriptions of what we heard in these schools. Especially all these schools see themselves as works in progress. They continuously problem solve, reassess their practices, setting new goals. And very importantly, as they do that, we learned they're really keeping up celebrating their successes, both the small ones and the larger ones. Our report, of course, goes into a lot more detail about each of these characteristics and how much all of these things work together to help schools maintain high student achievement. Finally, before I turn it over, I want to stress that the findings of this qualitative work resonate very strongly with a substantial amount of large national quantitative research studies, as well as with other reports produced by organizations like ours, and we cite this work in our report. And now I will hand over to Nancy and Bob from the Success for All Foundation, who will tell you about Success for All, a program and framework that can help schools develop and maintain the qualities that I just described.
Okay, thank you very much. We're very excited about the Public Agenda study, not only because it found good outcomes for Success for All schools, but also because it provided principles that any school that succeeds in high poverty communities is likely to find useful. That they went beyond just the numbers into being able to describe what was happening and to interview people to bring forward some of the texture of what really happens in schools that succeed over and over, year after year, in difficult locations because they accept nothing less than that. In our particular case with Success for All, this was very interesting to us. There were 2 of the 9 schools, actually 2 of the 3 elementary schools that were identified as outstanding schools in the Public Agenda study were Success for All schools. We only work in 33 schools in Ohio out of more than 1,000 elementary schools, so that's a rather extraordinary proportion of all of the schools that they might have looked at. But if you were able to visit these schools and both the 2 that were identified and many others, you would see very quickly the commonality between what we're trying to achieve in Success for All and the kinds of factors that the Public Agenda report is talking about. Success for All, as I think most of you who are listening will know, is a proven whole school reform model designed to help teachers ensure that all students from all backgrounds succeed in school. It was founded on the basic principle that we know all children can learn, we know all children have enormous potential, and it's the responsibility of the school to provide interventions that prevent problems from occurring in the first place and that intervene very quickly and effectively if children are beginning to fall behind. Success for All is implemented in elementary and middle schools, K-8, and it exists currently in about 1,000 schools across the country in big cities and rural places, and they're all Title I school-wide projects, but quite diverse in terms of their backgrounds. So our intention today is to talk with you a bit about what does Success for All look like, and how does it correspond with the key factors that were identified in the Public Agenda report. Nancy, you want to start with?
So in looking at a Success for All school, one of the greatest characteristics that you'll find is that there's a high level of engagement. The core concept that instruction is built around in a Success for All school is cooperative learning, which requires that students talk, they're active, they're fully engaged with their learning. Their job is to ensure the learning of their team and to ensure team success. So that leads to a lot of interaction. Not a quiet situation. It demonstrates high expectations for every child on the part of the children and the adults in the environment. So we've collected some comments from students and educators to give you a feel for a Success for All school, and we're going to present it now as a series of stills and audio that'll take 3 minutes. And in the PowerPoint download that's available, you can see this as a video.
Well, you figured out cardinal with background knowledge. Yeah. So I figured out your background knowledge.
The teammates in my group are very, very helpful. They help you to make sure that you understand the work.
What are we minusing here?
We're minusing the 12.
So it can be easier for us to understand if it's coming from another kid.
Oh, I get it. They honor the people. They relate them. She relates to Laura because Laura is quiet.
Less teacher talk, more student interaction and engagement.
I disagree because
It's that interaction where you know there's learning going on.
that the chapter may be about recycling.
I'm hearing students question each other.
It wasn't in the EJ, he wanted to go fast.
I hear students challenging each other.
How do you know? Because I counted them.
Could be.
So what's the effect? Effect was it equal? Would it make it a line class then?
That's a good question.
When you look at the Common Core standards, whether it's math or the language arts, students are expected to be able to dialogue and talk about their thinking, express their thoughts. That's what SFA already does.
We're seeing now teachers without any guidance looking at the rest of their day and going, well, I could use this piece from SFA down in social studies, or I could use it in science and my math. I could use cooperative learning here.
Nature's first screen is gold. Her heart is dull.
You can just think, how can I make sense of this? Just think of the strategies that you learn in SFA.
I'm terrified.
But students are given the tools to be fully immersed in the learning process, and they rely on each other.
Roads, cars, heights, clothes.
They listen to each other, they share their ideas, and can critique the reasoning of others as well. The students are invested in their own learning.
Okay, who wants to go first? I will. The first one is you have to capitalize the
Okay. There are 5 keys to success that we talk about in Success for All. These are trying to provide support for children to make sure that that we prevent problems from occurring, that we help all children to achieve their full potential, that we monitor them very closely to be sure that they're on track toward success, and that we are prepared to intervene early and intensively if they do run into trouble, despite our best preventive efforts, as of course will happen. One of the most important elements of Success for All is powerful instruction, and a key element of that is cooperative learning. When we say cooperative learning, it's not merely kids work, sitting together in groups of 4. The cooperative learning has a definite structure to it. The kids are in teams. The teams have team names. The kids sit together with them during reading time every day. And kids have a responsibility to each other. The responsibility is to see that every member of the team has mastered the content that's presented, and that the team is not finished. It's not done with its work until they're confident that everybody has learned the material. So kids tutor each other. They look over each other's shoulders. They high-five each other. They challenge each other. They really expect excellence from one another. If you haven't seen teams operate like this in a Success for All school, you find it, even people who think they've seen cooperative learning for many years are often astonished at the level of sophistication that the kids have in terms of their own learning and each other's learning, and their ability to really be genuinely helpful for each other, encouraging, but also have standards for each other. The kids have group goals, and group goals means that the team is trying to achieve success as a total team, and the only way you can achieve success is if all individual members of the group are succeeding, if they are showing their individual ability to solve the problems or read the material or predict what's going to happen or whatever the task might be, and to do that on their own without the help of the teammates. So the role of the team is primarily to prepare the team members for individual assessment, or individual performances, or individual portions of group tasks, and we call that individual accountability, where you can't just be successful as a team if the overall team is doing well on average. You are successful if each member of the team is achieving excellence. We put a lot of emphasis on celebrations of team success. The kids have cheers. They have certificates or other kinds of recognition that they can earn based on the total team doing well in terms of getting all of its members to be successful. So the kids do a lot of study within teams, of preparation to process with each other, to help each other master what the teacher has initially presented. We also focus on dynamic lessons that introduce the key ideas before the kids work in their teams. And here we're using best practice and research-based strategies to make exciting, motivating, effective lessons. And we're also using technology to enrich the nature of the lessons. We've developed a lot of video content that's woven into the lesson. It's not long videos, but just little bits of video that introduce, for example, in kindergarten and first grade, that introduce letter sounds and sound blending strategies and vocabulary in a way using puppets, a little bit like Sesame Street, to get kids excited about the content, but also to model for teachers strategies that they will use as in the parts of the lesson that they're responsible for. Later on in the grades, we use video again to introduce novels or expository material that the kids are reading, and we'll show videos that, for example, in the case you're looking at here, the kids are about to read a novel about the Depression. So there's a little introduction that gives kids a bit of background about what was the Depression and what was it like in reality. so that they understand what they're about to read, but also that they have a certain identification with what they're going to read, a certain concern about it because they've heard something about it. We also have characters that introduce the each of the novels. We have 132 novels, trade books, expository material, and so on, that in the upper elementary grades, and every one of them has a background or a little video introduction that is designed to, like a movie trailer, if you will, to try to engage kids with the content, which they then engage with further in their teams and with their teachers. We make a lot of use of something called Random Reporter, where kids have to be ready at all times to represent their team. Each kid has a secret number, 1 through 4, and so instead of calling on Johnny or Susie, a teacher will call on a kid number 2 from the Red Rockets or whatever the team might be, and the teacher doesn't know who number 2 might be, but the kids know, and they know that because the teacher is going to call on them at random to have somebody represent the group, everybody has to be prepared. It just provides another way to provide an incentive for kids to be sure that they're really demanding a lot from each other, that the other kids in their group completely understand what's going on. We provide common instructional materials across the school and across all of our schools to focus kids and teachers on higher order skills, on the kinds of thinking skills that Common Core is emphasizing now, but that we've been emphasizing for a long time. And we put a lot of emphasis on building cooperative skills inside groups, but also cooperative skills between teachers or among teachers and between teachers and kids. We have a whole curriculum for teaching getting along together strategies that's worthwhile in its own right, but also particularly necessary if you're using a lot of cooperative learning. So again, if you make a mental picture of what it looks like to walk into a Success for All school, what you're going to see is kids hunched over desks with papers all over their desks, engaged with each other, explaining to each other, very eager to learn the material and to help their teammates to do so. So Nancy, you're going to talk about leadership.
So the collaboration that is so crucial to Success for All school in the classroom is also shown at the whole school level by collaboration around the process of setting goals, deciding on actions that will get the school to the goals, and on monitoring and celebrating progress in a similar cycle. Again, there are high expectations for every student, and the high expectations are described across the school. Students are regrouped across classrooms for reading instruction so that a child is instructed at the level at which he's most challenged, but also likely to be successful. So teachers share kids. It's not a situation where a teacher has a classroom and is responsible for everything that goes on. Teachers work together to meet the instructional needs of children across the school. They set goals each quarter. They identify actions each quarter. They report to each other at the end of each quarter on their progress towards the goal, and they celebrate together. Quarterly assessments across the school are part of that quarterly goal setting and progress monitoring system. And unfortunately, teachers know you got to track the data to be able to use it. So there's an online data tool system that makes that easier and provides reports and tools that reduce the time that teachers have to spend trying to understand how to get to the data and how to interpret the data.
I think that what you'll see in a Success for All school that really corresponds with what the public agenda found for this set of schools generally is that these schools leave nothing to chance. These are schools that are closely monitoring what kids are doing, using all kinds of information, and then making sure that that they have a plan in place and are implementing a plan with quality to solve all of the problems that kids might have or to prevent problems from occurring. One of our keys to success is school-wide support and intervention tools. These are elements that focus on individual kids in particular who are struggling with reading or having other kinds of difficulties. Again, there's a reason that we called the program Success for All. We weren't saying just that we're going to raise the average level of reading performance in schools. We were saying that we were going to try to ensure that every single child, whatever their problems or background may be, is going to be successful. And obviously, in order to do something like that, you've got to be prepared to do more than just improve the quality of instruction. You've got to be ready to deal with individual kinds of difficulties. So clearly, the first thing you have to do is to identify children who are in need of help. This means doing constant assessment, as Nancy was talking about, that gives you an idea of where all of the kids are and how they're progressing and whether they're on track toward success or not. If you identify kids who are not on track to success in reading, then they may receive small group tutoring. This tutoring is done in groups of up to 6 using a computer-assisted method that we have developed and researched on its own and found to be very effective. Most often used as paraprofessionals to make sure that kids, whatever their reading difficulties may be, are likely to succeed in reading by the end of first grade. That we don't want kids to be going for very long with reading difficulties. Now, it happens that there are some kids who may go into second grade or kids who transfer in from elsewhere, but the notion is to try to focus very intensively to make sure that kids are going to be successful in reading early on before they become remedial readers. For the very small group of kids that doesn't get it still from small group tutoring, then we try to provide individual tutoring. That's also a computer-assisted tutoring model that can be done by paraprofessionals, by certified teachers, by reading specialists, by special education teachers. But the notion is we're not going to quit. The schools will not quit on kids who are having difficulty. You have to be cost effective. You have to be strategic and not have, expect that you have to have a certified teacher tutoring every kid who is having reading difficulties. But ultimately, if that's what a kid needs, then that's what you've got to be able to provide. Now, we also recognize that there are problems that kids may have that are not reading problems, but they may be holding the kids back, either in reading or in school overall. For example, there are kids who are not succeeding in school because they need eyeglasses, or they have health problems, or they're not attending every day, or they're having serious problems at home. So Success for All tries to identify those kinds of problems and to solve them so the kids are getting an appropriate kind of intervention that's tailored to their particular needs. Some of those solutions are things that can be done just within the school itself, but we also try to involve parents and the community in supporting children to make sure that all of them are going to be successful. We are just in the process with our parents and community component of rolling out something that will provide home links, electronic home links for children in preschool and kindergarten. Actually, that's not this coming year, but the year after. But right now we have home links where we have activities that parents are expected to do or asked to do with their kids that link to what's going on in school, so that kids have a consistency of approach between home and school that's very helpful in terms of building motivation and building skills and helping parents to be more effective at supporting the children's success. Another element has to do with attendance. Schools are given effective strategies for increasing attendance and dealing with kids who are late or who are not attending regularly. And we have a quite elaborate system of parent support of giving parents strategies that they can do at home or things that they can do in the school setting to support their children's success. One of those is something called volunteer listeners, where we have parents or other community volunteers who come in to read with kids on a regular basis, to give them opportunities to read and get feedback on their reading in celebration of what they're able to do.
The last, implementing an intensive research program, research-proven program like this is a task that requires in-depth and ongoing professional development, and that's the final key to success that we wanted to talk about today. It's not just a workshop. Success for All provides an intensive introduction to the strategies and structures that have been developed and proven over a period of 25 years. But the support is ongoing. A lot of the strategies are embedded in written materials just to make that communication easier. Teachers are organized into peer support teams with agendas that they can choose from that address specific implementation issues, areas where improvement is going to result in improvement in student performance. There are online tutorials and resources, school-based coaching through a full-time facilitator immersed in Success for All expertise who resides at the school level, email and telephone support from outside experts that are committed to the school, and on-site visits from the coach that is designated from Success for All Foundation frequently during the school year. It's a shared approach. The school's partnership with Success for All is what creates the dynamism that goes to create change and innovation in the school to get the energy going for success.
So there you have it. The keys to success for Success for All, the 5 keys, really have to work together. Success for All is not just a reading program or a reading and a math program. It is a whole school approach where each of the elements of what any good principal knows has to be accomplished in a school in a high poverty area is thought through and integrated around the needs of the school, around the needs of the community, around the needs of individual children. I think that that's what's most distinctive about the approach, is the degree to which every element has been carefully thought through. There's a very clear plan for how to accomplish that element that is adapted in collaboration with the whole school staff to make it appropriate for that particular school and community, but that has strategies, that has a toolkit for each one of those areas. One of the things that has been very helpful in our working with schools recently is that because of the very strong evidence base behind Success for All, we were able to get a large grant from the Investing in Innovation program, or I3 program, from the U.S. Department of Education. This grant, in order to get it, you already had to have quite substantial evidence from large-scale randomized experiments, and Success for All is one of very few programs that have that kind of evidence, and that's why we were one of just 4 programs that were able to get this scale-up grant. What we've been doing is using that grant to make it possible to offer $50,000 sub-grants to individual schools to help them adopt the Success for All program. The main thing that's done with that money is to help schools with the first year, which is the most expensive year, so that they can adopt the program most schools then can continue to support the program with their existing Title I money after that, that first year. But for us, the Investing in Innovation program has made it a lot easier for schools to take on the program, but it's also a recognition of the level of evidence behind the program and the confidence that the Title I program that the U.S. Department of Education has placed in us to really be able to make a difference in high-poverty schools.
So the Steubenville School District in Ohio is taking advantage of Success for All's I-3 grant funding. In fact, 4 schools in Steubenville use Success for All, and Garfield Elementary has been a partner for 13 years. So Margie Radakovich, principal of East Garfield Elementary, must be the best person to tell you about Success for All from a school's eye view. Margie?
Thank you, Nancy. As you can see for East Garfield, we are now a pre-K to 4 building. 5th grade actually moved to the middle school 3 years ago. We were a school of promise 2001, 2003, 4, 9, 10, and 11. And for the school year 10-11, we were rated excellent with distinction. And you can see our demographics. Everything that could be wrong with our kids as far as poor home lives, everything else, that every excuse that many people hear is what goes on at East on a daily basis. But we do not accept those excuses. Our kids don't accept those excuses. And our parents no longer accept those excuses because they do see that their children are able to learn and have success. 13 years ago, we were kind of in turmoil in Steubenville. We weren't getting consistent results the way we wanted, so we knew we had to do something. Many times the teachers were going in their classrooms, opening a book, and really just shooting from the hip. So we looked at several reforms, and we felt at that point in time that Success for All was the best fit for Steubenville City Schools. And so therefore we voted, and it was an overwhelming vote that we adopt this program. And basically what happened was our teachers, especially the staff at my schools, were tired of getting beat up all the time because our test scores just weren't making it, and we knew we needed some help. And Success for All provides that help for us and continues to provide it. One of the things that I've learned over my tenure as principal is that I had to give up control, just like the teachers in the classroom, which was sometimes a little bit hard for me because I am a control freak, and many of my teachers are as well, because we weren't learning that way, we weren't growing. And by using the distributive leadership model, everybody now has a buy-in, a focus, our vision, and we've been able to grow that way. We just felt that, you know, when this was put in place, we were able to use the tools that Success for All gave us with the professional development, with all the support we received from them and continue to receive, that our teachers had tools that they were able to give these students so that they were able to learn. We put a lot of stock now into using the data and driving our instruction and making a focus on that data, and that again is provided to us by the use of the Member Center from Success for All. Right now in Ohio we're going through changing our teacher evaluation system as well as our performance assessments, and every time I send teachers to any training to be, they come back to tell me, we're already doing this. You know, we do this every day with Success for All, so it's been a pretty easy adjustment for our staff and our students preparing for the new assessments. And I would encourage any of you to visit a Success for All school, and you're all more than welcome to come to East Garfield Elementary anytime.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so we're going to move in just a moment towards the Q&A, and I have a few questions in the queue already, which I'll share. But on the way, that you see some contact information for both Public Agenda and Success for All. As you heard, Success for All has lots of resources that can help you, including the grant program. So I'm sure that some of you on the webinar are going to be interested in that. For the Public Agendas part, we're always interested in working with folks through our research and our stakeholder engagement capacities, and if there's anything we can do for you, just contact us. One of the first questions was, will the materials be available for download? And if you just email us, and you saw the emails on the screen, Allison Rislow, for example, her email is on the screen. We'd be happy to email you the PowerPoint. But in terms of moving towards the questions, and as we said at the beginning, you can just type yours into the chat box. The first one that I want to first ask Carolin and then pitch it over to the Success for All folks is on technology-enhanced learning. One of the questions was, do iPads and computers and other technology play much of a role? I think the question was probably particularly for the Success for All folks, but first I want to ask Carolin if she saw much of that in Ohio, and then we'll ask the Success for All folks.
iPads, I didn't see any. Doesn't mean that there weren't any, but it wasn't. Computers, yes. Not so much that kids were like all having their own computers, but they used a lot of computers for interventions, and I think Bob alluded to that. So it was one tool to help kids who were falling behind. There was one school that is the high school in Cincinnati that was heavily supported by Cincinnati Bell. They had more technological things and incentives, actually. There was a program that students who kept up their grades over several semesters and actually were awarded a computer or laptop at some point. Yeah, that was specific to that school.
Okay, and Bob or Nancy, do you want to talk about that from the angle of Success for All?
Yeah, we do make a lot of use of interactive whiteboards, but otherwise we're working on applications for individual iPads and things of that kind for the day when all children are likely to have these things. As in the schools that we serve, that's not common yet, and it's horribly expensive if you don't have grants for it, or otherwise have ways to get a hold of the technology. So we're not there in terms of practice yet, but we are absolutely working on it, because I think within a few years that will become common, and we'll be ready for it when it is.
The most frequent use of iPads in our schools right now is by teachers who use it to collect data in real time in the classroom for entry into the online data system. So they have artifacts from the classroom and data points from the classroom from the instructional time, and the iPad makes it easy to track that.
And again, we use laptops with the computer-assisted tutoring models for children who are struggling.
Another question for Success for All program, somebody wanted to know how flexible the groupings are and how often do students change groups?
The groupings are changed about once every quarter. Students are evaluated for their reading level at the beginning of each quarter and placed into a group, which is again across grades as well as across classrooms within grades. If a student grows very rapidly, a facilitator will move a child in the middle of a quarter, but the ability to teach at one level in a reading group creates tremendous power for discussion and focus. So we don't subgroup within the classroom, and we don't have to regroup within the classroom over short periods of time.
We put a lot of emphasis on trying to move children along as rapidly as possible, and we encourage schools to never or almost never move kids down, no matter how badly they're doing. If the kids are having difficulties, then we want to provide tutoring or other kinds of services so that they can at least keep up with the pace of their group. But we're looking to move kids forward. We believe in these kids. We know how much they can achieve, and we want to make sure that they are at the highest level possible.
Okay, and a question for Margie. From a school leadership point of view, what would you say is the most difficult part as a school leader in either starting or sustaining Success for All, and, as a whole school intervention?
Well, actually, what I thought would be the most difficult part was convincing everybody that change was good. And many times that's the difficult part. But I think what we found with Success for All was I was able to put everybody's fears and apprehension at ease, because it's not only a program that does look at intervention, it's also a program that touches the accelerated, and we weren't able to do that before. So we're able to accelerate children as well as take care of the students that need a little bit more time or more interventions. So it really was perfect for me to sell to people, because we could touch all the bases and not just focus in on one group of students.
Somebody also asked, somebody's also associated with an online school, and was wondering if there's any place or any thinking about implementing Success for All in a virtual environment.
Not yet. I mean, in a way, it's counter to what we think is one of the greatest strengths of the program, which is that is the human connection. Is kids working in cooperative groups. Now, I have the greatest respect for people who are experimenting with online learning, but I think from our way of thinking, we would use online learning eventually as a supplement to a rich and full day in a group setting, rather than as an alternative to it.
Another question on data collection. I mean, we talked about data use both in the research, talking about the research findings and Success for All. But somebody's asking about how does the data get collected, and how do teachers actually do that? Carolin, you have a comment? Okay, hang on. I'm going to let Carolin respond first, and then Success for All can pitch in.
The 9 schools that we visited, they varied greatly on how they were doing that. Just some was, I think, was collecting data by hand and then putting in an Excel sheet. But what was, I think, very useful in most of these schools is that they had designated data people who took charge of kind of collecting the data, analyzing it, and kind of reporting it back and working with the teacher on what it meant and bringing everybody on board.
And Bob or Nancy?
So in Success for All, we have a system of data collection that's integrated with the instructional process and the instructional objectives. So, and it varies based on the level of the student, but we start in kindergarten, where we support teachers in learning how to collect data on students' oral language development, as well as their early literacy skills and their social emotional progress and goals. The key areas for success at that level, as you get into beginning reading, it focuses more on phonemes and graphemes and sound blending skills, and moves into early fluency, and then aspects of comprehension skills, clarifying, comprehension monitoring, questioning, summarizing, those kinds of skills. So we have definitions of all of the key points in student progress that we want to look at over a very large span. We have metrics that we've developed to allow teachers to collect these things. We have points in the lesson when there are opportunities to collect these without stopping the instruction, but just observing during instruction, as well as more formalized assessments that occur once every couple of weeks, and again the quarterly assessment that's sort of the culmination of that. So all of those systems are part of the whole integrated set of materials and strategies. And the tools to collect that data and report on that data are all developed and made easily accessible too. Kids actually have a team score sheet that they learn and they know so that they can take a look at that data. They look at their oral response scores to questions, their written response scores, they look at their paragraph level scores, they look at their fluency scores, and they do goal setting based on their scores, the same way that the teachers will get together in groups and look at the quality of performance and set goals for targeting the next most important step that they want to take. So again, it's integrated. It doesn't have to be invented from scratch by each teacher or each school, which allows them to use it much more quickly and with much greater fluency and much greater purpose very quickly.
Well, kind of a related question just came in as well, which is that one often hears about assessment fatigue, test assessment fatigue, but I think also probably data collection fatigue. And it sounds like that for whatever reason that we're not getting that in these schools, so the person is wondering why, whether it's testing or other kinds of data involvement.
I think that what's characteristic of Success for All is that the testing is very much integrated with instruction. It's not just testing for the purpose of testing, or finding out where kids are and then trying to scratch your head and figure out what to do about it. It's very much in course of what teachers have traditionally done to know the impact of their instruction rather than as something else added on top of their very, very busy days. That's not to say that there aren't issues or problems with it sometimes, but I think to the degree that people feel as though the testing is done for a good reason, that it tells them something that they really need to know, and that they've got good strategies, good ways to follow up on the testing and to make the needle move, it's a lot more accepted than when those things are not the case.
And when your kids are saying, well, where's my score? What did I get? And the demand for the data is coming from the kids as well, then it makes it easier. Because that's why teachers are there.
Okay, just a couple more because we're starting to run to the end of our time. One of the questions is, how did you get the buy-in from the staff and the community to implement Success for All? And Margie, I remember you saying that there was a vote or something along those lines. So maybe you can say a few more words about the process that you went through around buy-in, and perhaps the Success for All folks can talk a little bit about other kinds of experience they've had with that issue.
The staff was given an awareness presentation by the Success for All, and after they looked at that, there was a vote, and they, again, overwhelmingly, I'm going to say it, no, it was 13 years ago, but I'm thinking it was close to 100%. And I actually had a group of teachers visiting yesterday, and they said, was everyone on board? And I said, yes, they were. You had some that just felt like they needed a little resistance, but when they saw that the students were achieving and able to read and growing, even my special needs students, what can they say to that? Because that's why they're here, is to get students to do that. And so the vote was there, and then getting the community buy-in. We have second cups of coffee with our families, and we bring them in. When I have new families come in, we go over the program with them so they're aware of what's going on. The second cup of coffee, we'll bring parents in, and we'll look at different components of the program to make them aware of what's going on, and to let them know that they're a part of this as well, and what our expectations are for their child, for them, and what their expectations are for us. So it's a community effort to work with their children.
I think it's important to say we require a vote of at least 75% of the school staff by secret ballot before we'll work with the school. Or there are other equivalent ways that you can have individual buy-in. But I think that's really important, that this is not something that the superintendent says, okay, you know, everybody's got to do this, or, you know, you have some kind of a mandate that teachers push back against. This should be something that people make an informed choice to do in their school as a group, to value it, to carry it forward, because it becomes what the school is all about for many, many years. Our average school has done the program for 11 years, and I think if they didn't buy in the first place, that wouldn't be the case.
Okay, great. Well, our time is up. The PowerPoint materials are available. We'll email you a link. We also have recorded this session, and we'll email the link to that, so you guys have that if you want it. We have the questions that were in the chat box, and we'll scan through those and email them to you, email responses to you if it makes sense, you know, if we have a way to answer them. But also, if you have further questions, just email them to us at the address you see, any of us, and we'll respond to them. And we can follow up with you that way. So we appreciate your attention very much. Thank you for listening. We hope it was helpful, and have a great rest of your day. Take care, everybody.